Hey, what's going on? My name is Andy Monroe, the co-founder of Bullish Events. Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to record you a quick video. I know I say that all the time and then it ends up being like 25, 30 minutes. This one should actually be pretty quick, but I'm going to be talking about why knowing your numbers with events is so crucial. And I'm actually going to show you as well how you can make projections for your events to project your ROI. You can even use, it's a tool I'm going to show you. You can even use this tool to make a worst case, medium case, and best case scenario projection, just so you know where you are in your journey. Just knowing your numbers with events is so important, and I'm going to show you a really cool way to actually understand your numbers and to make some projections with your events. So one of the biggest mistakes I made early on in my events career was not making any projections and not establishing a budget before the event started, before we started spending money. We would just host an event and we would just kind of happen. We'd spend as much money that needed to be spent to make it happen, and we never really knew like what our goals were, what ROI we wanted to see. We didn't really know anything. We just kind of went off of pure intuition and gut feelings, gut instincts, which it worked. It did all right. But like an example is my first event I ever did was a 1,200 attendee sales conference in Las Vegas, Nevada, and the budget we established for this event was $250,000. And we should have known better. Like 1,200 attendees in Vegas, that's $250,000 is like the venue plus the food and beverage barely. That's just not enough money to throw a huge event down in Vegas. At least like what we were trying to do with it, and we ended up spending like 750K, and it looked really bad. It was my first event. I was working at this company called Fun Launch, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a second. And I came back and said, hey guys, we set a budget of $250,000. We ended up spending 750K. And it took us a long time to like figure out what the return on investment was. Like we had a lot of ticket sales, we had a lot of event sales, and we just had no idea what the ROI was. And then once we determined it, we actually didn't even know if it was a success or not. We're like, okay, well, we generated, X amount of dollars, but like, is it successful? Like, is this good? Is it a win? So we had no data. We had no projections. We had no budget established. It was kind of a mess, but luckily it worked out. But then we had CFO Lincoln, who was the CFO of Fun Launch. He began making projections, like for events, for all these products, for everything that had to do with Fun Launch. He started just making projections, like, "Hey guys, if we host this event next year and we want to see a 5x return on investment (ROI), we have to sell this amount of tickets. We have to sell this amount of black card sales. That was their high ticket program that they were selling at these events. We have to make this much revenue from black card sales at the event, and we need this much sponsorship revenue, whatever it was. Now it was just very helpful to see a breakdown, and he even made like projections like, okay, if we do this, this, and this, we'll break even. If we do this, this, and this, we'll actually lose money. So it was very good for us to see like, okay, we need to follow this route, because this one is our best case scenario. We need to avoid this route, which is our worst case scenario. um, yeah, so like I said, these projections were helpful and showed us exactly what needed to happen for us to succeed or fail. And to help you guys with this, I realized that when I first got started, I had no idea how to make projections. I didn't have a tool to make projections, and we just kind of we winged it, winged it. I think it's winged it. And I don't want you guys to wing it with your events. I want you to make decisions off of data, numbers, projections. It's good to have some intuition and some emotion in there with events. Obviously, it's a very relationships and human oriented industry, but it's good to make decisions off of numbers and projections, and from a controlled a controlled state rather than like a chaotic and guessing state. So I built you guys a cool little tool. All right, so this is the tool. As you can see up here by this little heart, this was built in Lovable. Lovable's awesome. If you guys want to, build essentially any tool to use for your business, your personal life, your fitness, even like journaling, meditation, whatever it is. I've been using Lovable for like 6 months now, and it's amazing. Actually, I've been using it for like 3 months. It hasn't been that long, but yeah, the stuff that you can build on Lovable is crazy. Obviously, there's some like constraints with vibe coding right now. Usually I've found that like these simple tools work the best when it comes to vibe coding, like stuff that's like, okay, well, I'm just trying to determine the ROI of my event. If it's like very elaborate and kind of crazy where it needs to have like a lot of moving parts and it's going to be holding a lot of users and storing data, I've had some trouble with it there. But if you guys if you're a developer or you understand how to code, then you can probably fix some of the issues. But I have no idea how to code, so I'm just relying purely on vibe coding. But that's a tangent. We don't need to go there. All right, so this is the tool: event ROI projection projections. It's essentially just a calculator for you to project the return on investment that you want to see from your events. So I'm just going to show you how it works. So up here, you have some input. So this is the event budget. This is where you're going to be inputting your event budget. So let's say, just hypothetically, for the venue, you're going to be spending $5,000. These are just based off of, absolutely nothing. For food and beverage, FOD and beverage. Let's go fix that. For food and beverage, let's say you're going to be spending $7,500. And then we've got some branding at $2,500. And let's say one more, we got travel, staff travel. You guys would be surprised when you start hosting some bigger events and you start traveling for events, you start to spend some money on travel. Travel's $5,000. So we got $15,500 event budget. So that's pretty appropriate, pretty healthy. Now let's go down here to ticket prices. So let's say you are selling tickets to this event. Let's say they're $497 as your average ticket price. And right here is average ticket price. So this means, you can, if you want to do tiered ticket pricing, which we do, you start low and then you start to work up as you get closer to the event. This is just like your average ticket price that you sell for this event. Let's say you have 75 attendees that bought tickets at an average price of $497. And let's also say that you're selling an offer at this event. So an event style that we use a lot for with our clients is an acquisition event. And it's an event meant to sell an offer, a product, a program, whatever it is that you're offering. So let's say you do have an offer. Let's say this offer is, we'll say it's like a $7,500 offer. Keep it low ticket. This is pretty low ticket for events. And because the room's so small, let's say you had a 15% conversion rate. That's pretty low for a 75-person event. It could be anywhere from like 20 to 25, even 30%, but let's just say 15 to be conservative. And sponsorship revenue, let's say we brought in, I like 7,500. Let's just say we brought in $7,500 in sponsorship revenue. Now you come down here and you can see some projections. So ticket revenue was $37,000. We had 11 buyers at a 15% conversion rate. That's $84,000 in revenue. We had $7,500 in sponsorship revenue. Gross revenue for the event was $129,150. Net revenue was $113,650. That is an 8.3x ROI on the event, which is pretty cool. And then down here, you can play with this stuff. I put this in because when we work with clients, we take a rev share from revenue generated at the event. If you guys are either working with us or you're working with somebody else that you're giving a rev share to, you can play with some numbers here. But let's say, for example, if there's a 20% rev share on the revenue generated and the service fee is like $10,000. You can see this is how much you'd pay out to like a partner that you were working with on the event. So you can use that if it's applicable. That's why I put if applicable right here. And then down here you can see the total distributions for the event. So the net revenue, $113,650. That's down here right here. And then after all the costs and stuff, the net ROI for the event is 7.3x ROI. So that would be a pretty healthy ROI for an event. You spent 15,000, you made 113 grand. That's pretty solid. I think anyone would be happy with that. But what you can do is you can come here and maybe you want to export this screenshot, and this is like your best case scenario. Like this is what you want to hit. This is like your goal, and then you can kind of come here and adjust some numbers. And let's say let's go with a medium case scenario. So let's say realistically, wow, that was a hard word to say. Realistically, you guys are like the medium case scenario would be a 10% conversion rate. Is that even a medium case scenario, best case scenario? I don't even know if people say that. And then you could export this as like you'd be happy with this, but it's not your goal, but you'd be happy with it. It's a 5x ROI. And then let's say like to break even, you want to the bare minimum you want to break even on this event. So let's say, you can do, let's say, you really bombed the pitch. It's like 3% conversion rate. Let's see what that does. That'd be still a 2x ROI. That's pretty good. So even like let's say 1% ROI. Let's say you sold one person. What would that be? Or not even one person. Yeah, that's funny. Let's say two people, 2%. I don't know, you get the point. Down here, that's a 2x ROI. So you can just see how you can play with the numbers and play with the different inputs and see what your different scenarios could be. But this is a tool that I built for you guys just to use to make projections on your events, to see what the best case scenario is, what the mid case scenario is, and what the worst case scenario is. And I would strongly encourage you guys, if you're going to be hosting any type of event, even if it doesn't have an offer, like let's say you're just doing an event, let's say it's a fulfillment event, so there's no offer and there's no ticket price either. Conversion rate doesn't matter because there's nothing. You still have 75 attendees, $15,000 budget. You come down here, you lost $8,000. You're $8,000 in the red. So what you would want to do to recoup this revenue would be to increase your sponsorship revenue. So let's say you want to break even on your event budget. So down here, that's a $0 in distributions, 0% ROI, but you did cover the cost. But let's say if you want to see some profit, let's say you generate $30,000 in revenue from sponsorships. Boom. There you go, 14K in revenue, almost a 1x ROI. Not too bad. You can just see how you can play around with it. This works for fulfillment events. It works for acquisition events. It works for just like activation events, IRLs, little meetups, whatever it is. I think it's really good to get into the practice of, just tracking your numbers, establishing a budget, putting in your numbers, putting in your sponsorship revenue. If you have an offer you're selling, put the offer price, put the conversion rates, and just see what's possible with events. It's a great way to visualize like what is possible with events. You can really get crazy with these numbers. And let's one more time just go back to let's say you have an offer. Let's say you actually did crush it with like a 30% conversion rate with 75 attendees, and the ticket price going back to $497, which is pretty appropriate for a 3-day event. I'd say that's even on the lower end. Look at that. You can see a 14x ROI, 220 grand off of $15,000 in spend. And of course, depending on how you acquire these clients, like maybe you have a marketing budget that you have to account for. So you could add in marketing, or maybe this is all like cold outreach, using your email list, using your social media following, doing joint ventures. There's a lot of different ways to like sell tickets to get people there. But, this would be, I'm sure most people would be pretty happy with, getting 220K off of a $15,000 spend. Like that's a pretty solid return on investment. So you can see this is a really cool tool to play with, and I'm actually going to give it to you guys for free. So the way that you can get access to this tool is to come over into school. You go to Bullish Events. I'll link this down in the description, but our URL in school is just school.com/event. Events was already taken. I think school itself owns events, which is, fair play there. That's a really good domain to have. But school.com/event is our school URL. You come here. This is our free mastermind for coaches, consultants, and community owners that are hosting events or are interested in hosting events. So whether you want to come learn about events or you want to come and just like share your experience and talk with other people that are hosting events, this is a great place to go. It's free. You join it. And then over here in the classroom under event tools, this is where you can access the ROI calculator, as well as a few other tools that we're building for coaches, consultants, and community owners that are hosting live events for their business. Now, like I said, I'll link this down in the description. And also, if you found this video valuable, please leave a like on it and subscribe to our channel. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.